So I want to share with you some stories. The first one is Barberton, Ohio, a little pregnancy center up on the south end of Worcester Avenue, leaving town to the south, called Community Pregnancy Center. 27 years ago, I read in the back of a church bulletin that they were out of infant formula. They needed infant formula. Now, this is an organization that does cribs and layettes and car seats and so forth, material goods for young women who can't afford it. And so I had a check from a speaking engagement I had done, and I told my wife, I said, I'm going to go and get some infant formula and bring it to this pregnancy center. So I went to the Kroger store, and I'll show you how long ago it was, if any of you remember Kroger's. And I had enough money to buy 5 cases of infant formula. Now, it used to come in cans. It was a liquid before they came out with the powder version. And so they had 4 cases of a product that my kids use called Similac with iron. Everybody knows Similac with iron. And but that's all they had, and I put those in my cart, and I asked the stock boy, I said, do you have any more Similac in the back? And he said, let me go check. And he went to the back and checked. And he came back out about 10 minutes later, and he didn't have any Similac, but he had a case of a product called Infamil. I'd never heard of it. But because he didn't have the Similac, I threw it in the cart. I bought the 5 cases of infant formula. I drove over to Worcester Avenue in a little house, and I went up to the back door, and I knocked on the door, and an elderly volunteer came to the door, and she said, can I help you? And I said, I have some infant formula. And I carried in 2 cases of Similac, and I put them on the kitchen table. This was a little house in the kitchen table. And through the doorway was the dining room, where it was the executive director's office, and she had a young woman in front of her. And she looked at me and smiled, and I smiled back. And I put the Similac down. Went back to the car, got 2 more cases of Similac, and I brought them. And she looked at me, I looked at her, she smiled at me, I smiled at her, I set the Similac down on the table. Then I went back to the car and I got the Infamil, and I carried it in. And as I walked through the doorway, she looked at me, she stood directly up, she walked over to me and said, is that Infamil? And I said, yes. And she says, the woman I have with me here, her baby can only have Infamil. Would you mind carrying it to her car? And I said, I'd be happy to. And so I'm carrying this case of Infamil to her car, and I hear the executive director say to the young girl, problem solved, an angel just dropped off some Infamil. Now, you guys don't know me. I'd never been called an angel. I've been called lots of stuff. Most of which we couldn't say in chapel, but an angel I had never heard before. I've been working with that organization now for 27 years.